Last year, I built Content Automation OS, and we're now at version 3.0. And the question that I get all the time is, Mitch, how did you build this thing? It is an absolute beast. So much work went into this. How did you do it? And the short answer is this. I did 12 years of experience of how to create content, hired team members, failed a lot, figured out the processes, all of the important steps, and then I automated different parts of the process in order to build this beast of an AI automation. That's the short answer. Obviously, you spending 12 years to go through that process doesn't make any sense when people have done that before you. So in this video, I'm going to take all of the experience that I have built over those years, how I turn that into databases, then how I turn that into AI automations using Make.com so that I could then automate entire workflows for things like podcasts, newsletters, YouTube videos, and it can be available for any type of brand with any type of brand voice as well. If you think that is interesting to you, then stick around. And if you are somebody who wants to automate parts of your business yourself using AI automation with these types of tools, then this video is probably going to be very interesting for you. Or maybe you're getting into the AI automation agency space and you want to help other brands and clients automate as well. This is absolutely essential for you, because if you are going to be building projects for other people, then they need to see them in something like a mind map first before you start building, in order to make sure that you're not going to miss any parts of the process and so that you can see the bigger picture. So I'm going to come back to the start here in just a moment. I've got it starting at step number 1, which is creating the databases, and then how I went through and joined all of those different workflows together in order to produce the end result. But there are 3 key principles for structuring databases, and I have a video on this, which I'll link in the description. You can watch this afterwards, where I go deeper into the 3 key principles for structuring databases. But the things you need to think about is this. Number 1, you need to have smarter field organization. So you don't want to overload your tables too much. You want to have different views to structure the data all the time rather than having more tables. And you want to future-proof your base so that if you make one update in one location, it updates everywhere else. And that's what we call linked records. So that helps centralize all of your data into the one field, so that even if you're making updates in different tables or different parts of your database, which, you know, all of this will make more sense as we continue watching and talking about this, then it updates everywhere automatically. And this is what we would call like a smarter relationship between the fields within each of the tables within the larger database itself. And then we want to make sure we have the primary field uniquely identified, so that if we are linking those records into other tables, we can see if we pull that link across or that record across, that it's unique. We know exactly what we're bringing across into that other location. So like I said, I have a full video on just that part of the process. You can check that out once we get to the end of this video. But if you don't know yet, like the content automation system helps take workflows like YouTube, newsletters, podcasts, and blog posts and automate all of those things, plus then creating social media posts and automating that posting as well. Plenty of YouTube videos on there for you to check that out, and we'll link through to the sales page if you want to see that in more detail as well. But basically, it's a great system to buy for super cheap to save you 40, 50, 60 hours of build time, so that you can download my template, import it into your own system or into your own Airtable or Smart Suite accounts, and then you make your own customizations on top. That would be my suggestion. This template is built as a template to get you started. Then you want to customize on top. This is the whole premise that I have been building with over the last 12 months, which has been so many software tools take a small part of the process, and they charge you like $30 to $40 to maybe $100 a month just to use a small part of their tool and a small part of your process. Whereas we can actually replicate a lot of those tools now very easily, building our own tools inside of Airtable using Make.com and AI to remove those $30 to $99 a month tools from our workflows. And it probably only costs like $1 or $2 a month in AI fees anyway. So that's why we're building these workflows, so that we can be much smarter with our businesses. So stage 1 in creating this content automation system was structuring the database. So one of the key principles I think about when it comes to AI automation is thinking about it in terms of a system. We don't want to just thinking about siloed automations where once you start building it, it automates this part of the workflow, but then it wrecks like half of the other part of the business or part of the team that is working on it. you want to think about, okay, what are all the things that we need from a systems point of view if we were to automate marketing, if we were to automate sales, if we were to automate our operations and our project management? What are all the things that we need no matter what when it comes to that part of the process? And that's what I would call our foundational databases. So for me, in this part of the process, the foundational databases are things like your brand assets. So we have within a single database our brand voice guidelines, any excluded words that we don't want the AI to use. We have an about the brand section. We have a writing grade level. So most of our stuff gets written at a 6th grade level, which improves the prompts when we're running AI automations. We also give it a language. So you could have, let's say you're an agency in Europe, for example, and you're multilingual. You might be working with clients who speak in Spanish. You might be working with some who speak in Italian. You might be working with some that speak in English. We could actually set inside of our brand assets tab different languages for each of those different brands, and then use that in every single AI workflow moving forward so that we don't have to go in and change our prompts all the time from English to Spanish or English to Italian. We feed the AI with English and we ask it to provide the output in Spanish or in Italian, whatever that may be. So that's what we're using brand assets for, is to set all of our brand details up front and then push them and link them into all of the other workflows moving forward, which we're going to get to in a later stage. The other things we have in here are like our AI models. So whether we're doing content automations, sales automations, or operational automations, we still need an AI model, right? We're using an AI aggregator like OpenRouter, so we can pull in any different model that we want at any stage, because you might want to use a Claude in one part of the process, you might want to use ChatGPT o1 in another part of the process, and you might want to use Perplexity in another part of the process. So rather than going into our automation tools and making the adjustments there, that is the slow and hard and old way. We want to just make the change inside of our dashboards, pulling from our database inside of the actual system itself. And then we can repeat the same process for our images. And we also have a prompt library. So rather than putting our prompts inside of the automation tools, that is like the beginner stage, when you kind of just get in a feel for this. That is a slow, old, and hard way as well. We want to create a prompt library where we can feed in as many prompts as we want into a system that is automated. We don't want to automate the prompts. We want to automate the system behind the prompts. That is like number one key principle. I also have another video about advanced AI automation building techniques as well, which might be interesting to you to watch, where we talk more about like these advanced building tips as well. So that's like our foundational databases, right? So that's pretty much going to be used in, no matter what we build this in once into our database, and then we can use it in all of our workflows moving forward. But then in this particular system here, we have our creation databases. So here we have our content creator database and we have our AI output database. So our content creator one is pulling in all of the fields that we need to feed into our AI for YouTube, for newsletters, for podcasts, for blog posts. Some of those fields are going to be used for all of those workflows, like maybe we're going to have SEO in all of those. Maybe we are going to, we're definitely going to have a title in all of those. Maybe we have a little bit of context in all of those. So some fields will be used in all of those, but there'll be other fields like in YouTube. We only want a first comment for our YouTube videos, for example. We only want context about a newsletter for our newsletter field, right? So like some parts of the content creator database is going to be the same and some parts are going to be different. So there's actually two different building techniques that could happen from here. You could build an individual database for your YouTube fields and an individual database for newsletter, an individual database or an individual table for your podcast, an individual one for your blog post. But if you were to do that, you would have to do, this is like getting ahead now, you would have to, if you were to build multiple databases, you would have to build multiple triggers for your automations. So what we did, and if we come back to the end here, we have just the one database for our content creator trigger, and we have multiple views, which means we only need to build those automations once instead of four different times, because we're using different tables. So that's like, again, coming back to our advanced techniques as to why. Then there are parts of this process where if we line up a whole bunch of different prompts, and they cycle through, so they iterate through is what we would call it technically, then we can't feed that back into the same record. So a record is simply just a row in a database. If you were to feed it back into that same record, you would be limited by maybe just one output per prompt, which is not ideal. We want to take our prompts and we want to give ourselves as much room to move. So like we want to feed in as many prompts as we want and automate them. That's the whole point of automation, right? So I can technically feed in 80, 100, 200, 1,000 different prompts into the system, and it will just go through one by one until it either glitches out or until it completes. And we need to feed that back into a database somehow. So we have this AI output field is what I call it, which feeds in the final content from our prompts in this particular section here. So this then allows us to filter that content and then feed it back into the right locations at the right time. If you want to dive into how that actually works, you can look at the overview video, which I'll link up in the description, of like how this system works and how we use the interfaces to help with all of that as well, so that when we are running these workflows, we can put our prompts here at the top and then feed those into a table and then move those from a table into this bottom section here, which then structures out all of the information that we need for uploading a YouTube video, for example. So that's really step one, is like creating your databases. And databases is how many databases you need, plus what are the fields that are required within those databases. Step two is then linking those databases together. So like I said, this is what we call a linked record. So in this instance, we've linked all of our foundational databases to the content creator tab, because we want to use our brand assets in the content creator workflow. We want to use these AI models in our content creator workflow. We want to use the prompts in our content creator workflow. So we link all of those in via a linked record inside of Airtable or any of these database tools that you're using in order to connect them. So the benefits of that are, if we come into here, we'll just go back into the database component. If I have these brands here called Big Moves, where I'm saying our brand voice is we are direct and authority and fun, I could then change this to we are scientific. If I update this here, if I come into the content creator view and come across here, I've updated this in this section here to say we are scientific. Let's find, here it is. We are scientific. We write in short sentences, blah, blah, blah. So I can update that here. We should also have our brand voice in here somewhere. So it's linked in here as well. So you may have then a dozen different tables that have the brand voice guidelines in it, which means when you update that here one time, it updates in those 12 locations all at once. So that's simply what a linked record is. And often you'll link your records and you might have to do that multiple times in order to bring it back in. But basically we're linking the records, and then we have what's called lookup fields within those linked records that pull all of that information across. So if we make one change in one location, it updates in every single table throughout the database. Stage three is once we've got those created, we can then begin to create our individual workflows for each individual piece of content or content workflows. So for example, in our YouTube workflow, we then have a creation database, which is our main one, but we want to drill that down to be a bit more granular. So we then create a table view called a YouTube view. And in here, we have a few YouTube only components like our YouTube titles, our YouTube description, our YouTube first comment. So we showed this before in this workflow, is if we look down here, we've got our YouTube title, our YouTube description, our YouTube first comment. These are all the things exclusive to the YouTube workflow. So if we come back into our databases and we come into content creator, you can see on the left-hand side here, rather than building an entire new table where we would have to repeat so many of the same things, plus if we were to create an automation, we would have to create the automation multiple times now, we can just create a view that has all of the important information required for YouTube only. So that if you need to work from a table rather than an interface, then you can just come into this view, and this has all of the important information for you to complete when you are working on the YouTube workflow. So we create that YouTube field first, or that YouTube view, and make sure we have all of our fields that we need for YouTube. And here's now where we can start to build the automation. So in order to build that automation, we I call this a content creator automation built inside of make.com. We simply trigger this from a webhook. So the reason why I initially did it, the trigger from a webhook, is a lot of people use the free version of Airtable. And if we triggered from the automations that Airtable provided us, then you would use up the automations very quickly because they're very limited on the free plan. Whereas when we triggered via a button, it just simply sends a webhook to the automation and it doesn't use up any of the inclusions inside of Airtable. Now, since I've done that, Airtable have cracked right down on API calls because I imagine so many people were building in similar ways to this. So they're a bit more strict about it now, but still the same principle works, which is if I hit this button, it sends, if this was connected, this is a template, but if it was connected, it sends this webhook, which would have an ID here, plus the ID of the Airtable base, the Airtable table, and so forth, sends that into make.com and sends all of this information across here in the single row. It sends all of that into make.com. So we trigger it with the webhook, it captures all of that information. We then make an API call to Airtable, which is another advanced AI automation building technique. I'd just definitely go and watch that video if you're interested in why we're using API calls over the normal Airtable modules. So making an API call to pull all of that information from Airtable into the automation. Then we're setting our variables here, like all of these fields that we just had over here. So we're saying, hey, this is the transcript, this is the SEO keyword, this is the YouTube title. We're setting all of those things here. And then we are removing any missing fields with AI. So if you're using tools like NAN, you can actually do this without using AI. Inside of Make, it's just easier to use AI, where any of these other content creator fields, so any of these in our raw data view, so things like our newsletters and so forth, all of this newsletter information, if this is all blank, then we just pull those things out of the automation so there's not being referenced. And then this is where the automation begins with our prompts. So we have an iterator here that is pulling from our prompt library. So if I come back into our YouTube one and we find where we can add our prompts. So we have our prompt library linked, which we did in step number 2, where we can pull any YouTube prompts into here and we can pull in as many as we want. So if I was to pull in 3, we can see we have a formula here that puts these prompts together. So these are the 3 prompts that we just pulled in. So we're saying in the automation here, we're saying pull those prompts and iterate through them one at a time. So we're just running one prompt at a time through the content prompt. So this prompt simply pulls in all the information from our brand voice, our writing grade level, all of that type of stuff. It pulls in a YouTube transcript so that it has the reference of all the context. And then it pulls in the prompt at the end to say, hey, this is what I want you to do with all of that information. It then creates the AI output. We use some match pattern modules here to filter it so that we can feed it back into our AI output table. And then it will set these prompt types and product types to filter our outputs back into this table here. We send it into Airtable. We run through, so we aggregate that, which is running through each prompt individually. So that's why it's highlighted. It will just run through this as many times as it's need to. And then at the end, we will make an API call back to Airtable to say, hey, this automation is now complete. You can now go and edit and use all of your outputs. So this is what this AI output table is for, is it sends all of that information into the final content section. It then filters it to put it into YouTube content and content marketing, and it makes it as a status to do so that we can come in and actually will show inside of our workflows here of like what we need to do with this information when it comes into this section here. So we can also take it and then create different pieces of content with that output as well. So we might want to add some images to those contents. We can do that from here as well, which we're going to get into. So that's simply what we've done at this stage. So we've created that automation now, and then we simply send those details back into the AI output field we're going to get to. So we do that. Now we repeat that for the same parts of the process. So newsletter is the next one. So we have the same automation, but now for a newsletter, we might actually want to have a thumbnail image. So we can automate that part of the process as well to say, okay, when I have my newsletter written, reference that newsletter, create a prompt, enhance that prompt, and create me an image that is 16:9 for my thumbnail, for my newsletter. So if I come in to show you the dashboard here, we've got our newsletter flow. Let's go into an existing one with an image. We have our newsletter flow here for the Lamborghini, and the AI has created this image here that we could use as a thumbnail for that newsletter if we wanted to. So that's how we can have multiple triggers within our tables in order to do whatever we need to do. In theory, you can have as many triggers as you want. Maybe you want to send off and create a video using some sort of API. Maybe you want to send off and get it to check for plagiarism or check for, to make sure it's factually correct, and using some type of API tool for that. You can even just create simple automations that are not AI automations in order to send your finally written newsletter into your tool like Klaviyo or like ConvertKit via the API, so that when you can open up your dashboard inside of ConvertKit, for example, you can see the text is already there for you. You just need to make your final changes. If you wanted to get really granular, you can schedule your newsletter from inside Airtable if you wanted to. I'd probably check it first. That's just me. I'd like to check it inside of the ConvertKit before I schedule it. So I just send it in there via the API and then schedule it from inside. But technically, you can broadcast it and publish it from inside of Airtable as well using the API. So we would repeat that for the newsletter field. We would repeat that for the podcast field, and we would repeat that for the blog post one as well. So the blog post one is a little bit more advanced. I've talked about this multiple times on this channel now. I'm not going to go into the detail, but we are running really long blog posts by connecting a whole bunch of different stuff, doing outlines first. It's pretty advanced. It's pretty incredible. So go check out other videos for that. So once we have then all of those workflows, it's now like, okay, if we have these automations running, how do we send them back to the right locations? So if we are iterating through prompts, we need those iterations to go to a new database because of the reasons as to what I said at the start of this video, which is if we're iterating through 1,000 prompts, it just doesn't make sense to have 1,000 fields across the top here in your table to try and send each of your prompts back into. But what does make sense is having an AI output field where the output creates a new record, because these records, these ones that go across, you can create thousands of those. You can create hundreds of thousands of those. So as long as you have a field or a database to send that information into that doesn't require going across, it goes down, then you can have as many as you want. So that's why we send this part of the workflow into creating a new record in the AI output database. It goes up into here. And in the AI output database, it has our final content, which is essentially the AI output. We also ask it to filter. So that's what these match pattern ones are all about. It's filtering the output based on our input so that we can have some structure in the database for seeing our outputs so much easier when we're building interfaces and stuff. So I'm not going to talk about interfaces here. That's a whole other story to get to it on another day. But once we send that into our AI output field, we can actually do other things like create images. So this is how we then structure our social media posts. Is we send our social media posts into our final content. We then create an image to support those social media posts. And then further along, and I'm going to show you, we create a social posting automation as well. So stage 7 is automation output number 2. So like I said, number 1 is going into the AI output field to create a new database. But an important part of this process is closing out the loop of these other fields as well. So I liked having a status inside of each when we trigger an automation, so I can see where it's at. So by default, everything is set to pre-AI. When it's writing, we have this update field here. So we make an update. So when it begins, it changes it automatically to AI writing. So we can see inside of the dashboard that the AI is actually working. If you don't do this, you have no idea if it's running or not, and it could take up to 60 seconds. And you're sitting there wondering what's going on. Is it working? Is it not? And maybe something's glitched out. You don't really know. Or maybe the trigger just didn't work and it's still sitting on pre-AI. You wouldn't know. So we change it at this point, and then it runs through. and then it will sit in AI working as it's going through this iteration over and over again. And then the final part here, which is another update into the Airtable record, which is updates original record ID status to AI complete. So the automation will come in and then it will tell us that it's complete. And then we know that everything has now been completed for that particular system. Stage 8 now is the AI output and social media image output automation. So like I said, now that we have this output field here, what we can do is we can create on top of those outputs as well. So we can use the final content in the output field and we can do things like generate an image. So what we have, and let me come back into our interfaces. So if I come into our social posts here, we have a post here from the Steal This AI powered project management tools for. So what we've done is we've asked it to reference it looks like here, social content. So it's referencing tomorrow's newsletter. In tomorrow's newsletter, we're going to be talking about how to build an AI powered project planning system without coding. So we've fed that information into our AI output field. And now what we could do is we could create automations to post this on X, for example. We add in our dates and we can upload an image here if we wanted to, or we can do things like add an image prompt and schedule it through our favorite tool like Flux, for example, is probably my favorite right now. So we can add a prompt here. If we want the prompt to enhance, we can say yes, and we've got it trained on some prompt writing for AI images. We select our AI image that we want to select for enhancing that prompt. We select our AI image, which would be Flux Pro, and then we set our Flux Pro to 1 by 1, and we can create this image here. So it won't let me to create until I add an image prompt, but we can go create, and then that'll feed off into the automation here, which is the exact same process, which is it pulls the information from Airtable and makes the update to say that it's writing, sets our variables of all the important things it needs for the prompt. We have our enhanced prompt option here. We have our Flux module here. So this is an API call into replicate.com. We wait for the image to get created. We then pull that image. We want to compress it so that we use Cloudinary and Tinify to compress the image. And then we upload the image into Airtable. And then we would change the status here into AI complete. So that's how we then create an image for any of those outputs. And it can be any type of image for whatever those outputs are as well. But that's not all. Once we then get to that stage, we have now our final version back at the start here, which is, okay, if we have a social media post and we have a social media image, then why can't we just post it directly from here as well? So we have our database structured so that we can do that. So we can post to social media. And, there's so many different ways you could structure this. I would probably structure it a little bit differently if I was running this, but this is an example of, we can say, okay, when a social media post is approved, so we've got a filter on this to say that it's approved, and if the time is now or in the last 15 minutes, it will pull that approved post and it will look for the filter of what social media channel we want to post it on. And then it will run up that channel. So let's say it's going to post to Facebook. It'll post to Facebook, and then it will come in and say, update Airtable to say, hey, is now posted on Facebook. Here's the ID. And I'm going to change this status from approved to now published. So we can do these entire systems to have a fully enclosed loop on our content automation processes, or any process for that matter. So that's how content automation works in a nutshell. Hopefully I didn't lose you. If I did, then probably the best way to begin understanding is to dive into the product itself, figure out how the automations work, put it all together, and then you'll get a good feel of like, okay, here's how I can do that. And then you'll also, the most important reason to understand all of this is because you may then want to adapt these workflows for your own systems. For example, I had someone come to me the other week, just last week during our product lab session for the Massive Moves community, which you can find more about on the website if you wish. And he wanted to turn some of these into a really structured email writing sequence. So like 10 emails he wanted to turn some of these workflows into. So all he needed to do, he's getting very confused with this, but all he needed to do so that he didn't have to set up any new AI automations at all, you can use the existing system itself, is he would just come into our content creator tab, create himself a new view for the fields that he wanted to add in for writing emails. So there's more to do with like affiliate offers and stuff. So you probably had to have a space about what is the offer, who is the target audience, what is the main angle, maybe a few other things. Create those extra fields inside of the content creator field, create a view, come in and then just add those things to your tools variables, add those things to your prompt, or your add these tools to your AI modules so that it's inside of the prompt as well. And then once it's in all of that, he will then be able to create his prompts into the prompt library, feed those prompts in for each individual email, as many as he needs, and then use the exact same process to then feed it back into our AI output fields, make some filters for your new categorization or your new view, and then done. You don't have to go in and build AI automations all the time. You just use the system that has been built already for this particular workflow or any workflow. So again, like this comes back to like, especially if you're an AI automation agency owner, maybe this system that I've built is not exactly it, but you want to be thinking about the same structure of like, how do you build for clients? Because every single business has a different workflow. But if we build a system, when you're installing your AI automations, the AI automation part becomes so much easier to install. It's literally the same process over and over again. It's the tiny changes of what are the prompts that they need to use? What are the fields inside of that system that become very important? If you can get to that stage, you're like eliminating 80% of the hard work that you have to do when you're building these automations. And it just makes building and automating your business or client businesses so much easier. So that was a lot. I hope you stuck around to the end. If you did, congratulations. There's so much value that I've been sharing that are more advanced on this YouTube channel. It doesn't get the eyeballs it deserves. So make sure you check out this video next.